Record with Mary Turner. Brought to you by Bush. Don't just reach for a beer, head for the mountains.
Hi, I'm Donald Fagen.
And my name is Walter Becker.
Go again. You go first. Hang on.
Hi, my name is Walter Becker.
And I'm Donald Fagen.
And here, what are we supposed to say?
Just, we're Steely
All
Dan
right,
or
hold it,
whatever.
hold
Oh,
it.
but I can't remember what station it is.
It's right here.
Oh.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Donald Fagen.
And mine is too.
Whoa! And here's a cut from our latest album. That wasn't so good.
No, we could do that again.
Hi! Oh, wait.
Let's get the
Hi.
Steely Dan part in there.
Hi.
That might help.
Wait a minute, you're too high.
Automatic.
He's going real high.
Right.
Hi, I'm Mary Turner, and those are the guys that put together Steely Dan in college in upstate New York and started writing songs together. But their lyrics and harmonies were too strange for the pop scene of the late 60s. So they paid the rent by playing in the band with Jay and the Americans.
Did you go on the road with Jay and the Americans?
Yes.
Was it fun?
Sometimes it was
Yes,
fun,
sometimes.
depending on where we went,
Tampa was foul that summer, wasn't it?
So was Waldorf, Maryland.
Waldorf,
Remember that?
Maryland was no fun either.
Stardust Motel.
Oh, yeah.
But there was some, or the time they were playing it in Queens and Jay got subpoenaed. That was no
That's
fun.
right, the guy with the gun and everything.
Grand
It was
jury.
terrible.
He was backstage. He was subpoenaed to. That's a whole other story.
We don't want to get into that if you want to know the truth,
Yeah,
because
Jay.
we could end up with a horse's head in our bed. You know, that sort of thing.
But it was. I used to look forward to playing. We had hopped up their songs considerably, harmonically and rhythmically, so that it was more fun for us to play. You know.
Scream.
Yeah, more right. We had modernized their sound, and I used to look forward to doing it. And of course, it paid the rent. And we would work for
I
them like
think
2-3 weekends a month.
Yeah,
like
well, I think that was the best band we were ever in.
The nice thing
That's
about that band was
John's-
that we were in the band, and there were 4 guys with suits in front of us.
Yeah, I mean, we
And-
couldn't play shit, but we were in the band.
It was
I mean,
like
Ivy-divey. It was,
Right.
Pushu Pushwa.
that's right.
It was nice.
It was like
nice.
it was like being part of the 4 Tops. That's
Yeah,
where we looked
they
at it. We
had,
didn't
you
look
know-
at their faces. We just
They had uniforms and things, and I remember the guy who ran the Seven Seas Lounge at the Newport Hotel in Miami Beach used to complain about the way the band dressed, because, Jay and the Americans looked really swell, but we were always not quite so natty.
Then did you go step right out of being part of Jay and the Americans band into being staff songwriters at ABC?
Well, it was a long step because it was from New York to California.
and it
It
was
was a doozy.
Yeah,
so
we
to
had
speak.
we were prior to that step, we had been standing in a pile of legal entanglements that made it a very, very tough
Had
step.
to
But
call
once,
our attorney
yeah, we had to call our
to
attorney.
get to California, but it all worked out for the best.
Yeah, we just because we weren't really doing anything particularly earth-shaking musically. I mean, there's only so much you can do with only in America,
Mainly we used to ride
And,
bikes in Prospect Park, and that sort of thing.
And we wrote songs that we were writing a lot, but we had no vehicle for them. Jay wasn't interested. He thought we were amusing. Jay was very tolerant towards us, because I think he indicated in when he told Rolling Stone that we were a couple of suckers that he was gonna.
A true fondness for you.
Yeah, he really did like us, and so when we got when we were offered a job writing songs, and actually doing something besides playing only in America, it seemed like a nice idea for a change, Plus, they would pay us every week, whether he had a club gig or not.
Donald and Walter got to L.A. through an old New York friend, Gary Katz, who'd just gotten a job as producer for ABC Records.
See, when Gary got to L.A., the first thing he did was he said, after he got his job, he says, "I'll put my job on the line for these guys," right? So they hired us. They figured, what
And
the
he
hell?
still had his blue bathrobe on, too.
He still had his blue bathrobe on and his credit card trouble, but they really were, they were very thrilled with Gary. The situation was then that ABC had, the Mamas and the Papas and Barry McGuire and
Three Dog Night.
the Grassroots and Bobby Vinton and stuff like that, right? Tommy Rowe. You know, they didn't have a big underground thing going. They hired Gary with the idea. Gary had a certain type of mustache that convinced them that he would be a good underground producer.
Right.
And
we were like the, Catboy and the all-night newsboys of ABC Records,
yeah, we were the Grateful Dead of Beverly Boulevard
Yeah,
at that time. We were very, very weird.
Little by little, they got a band together to play their songs. One of the guitarists they chose was Jeff Baxter.
Here's what happened. Gary got a job as a staff producer at ABC Records. Howard Stark and Jay Lasker were running the joint. Both really good guys. And Gary signed Donald and Walter as staff songwriters. Because at that time Steve Berry was staff there. And there was the real use for those tunes. Of course, they really didn't know what kind of tunes they were going to get, you see. And to quote Jay Lasker, he said, Gary, you didn't tell me that I was going to get a band with these two dummies. So we had a band. Jay had a band, and he had to go out and buy a PA system, so we could rehearse in one of the storerooms. It was great. It was like being in a family. I remember when Howard Stark gave me a check for $1,000. I went nuts. I said, $1,000? Wow. And he looked at me real seriously. He was on the other side of the desk, and he said, yeah, get yourself a nice apartment and find yourself a nice girl and, put some money in the bank. And I was flabbergasted. I said, oh, thanks, Howard, thank you very much. And he really did, I mean it in sincerity as well as funny. But that was the attitude, Then they sort of took care of us, and they couldn't really understand what was going on, but they were going to go along with it. As long as Dennis Laventhal said it was okay, then we were going to do it. It was good. And then we had a little room upstairs, an abandoned office, where we bought a little PA system, and we set up all our stuff, and we put a band. We did just like a band. We put a band together. We learned a bunch of tunes, and then we went out of this place, this club, and played. It was really nice.
The band they finally came up with had Donald Fagen on keyboards and most vocals, Walter Becker on bass, Jeff Baxter and Denny Diaz on guitars, Jim Hodder on drums, and Dave Palmer singing lead on some songs. Keeping it all together was producer Gary Katz. The old office they worked in was no more than 15 feet square. It had no windows, white tile on the ceiling, and bright fluorescent lights. And the only time they could have rehearsals was at night.
They started around 6 because I was working at Valley Sound. I was repairing guitars and customizing guitars for people. And because we couldn't have this, we couldn't practice in the daytime anyway because it was 9 to 5 in the office, so we go to our band in office around 6 o'clock. With some sandwiches and stuff, and we go in there and we start rehearsing until really late. And I drive back in my '68 Ford Torino that I bought some nasty insides for. And Donald would follow me because Donald liked the way the car looked from the back. It had a great look. I had a painted Weinberg in the metal flag.
The big success of Do It Again and the first Steely Dan album came as quite a surprise, and the new band had to go out on the road. Those wild times and more when we continue with Steely Dan Off the Record. So here's this bunch of guys who'd kicked around pop music for years. They get it together in an abandoned office at ABC Records and rehearse their unusual music with strange lyrics. They make an album, put it out, and whammo, it's a hit. How'd they react? Here's Jeff Baxter.
Went nuts. And we started going on, we started doing, ooh-wee. Went on the road. Went on the road, Steely Dan. We had two road guys. That Warren Wallace and John Famula, that's right, they were our road guys. And Gary McPike. Of course, they looked a lot better in the band. As a matter of fact, we got panned at the Whiskey A Go-Go our first gig because we didn't look good. The reviewer said that, he wasn't sure about the music, but he definitely knew that, we were the ugliest band he ever saw. So now that we figured out what the LA music scene was like, we decided we would take our music and go someplace else. So we took our little traveling circus around and we played gigs, and it was really good. And we took this little show on the road and played a lot of places, and everybody really liked us. I was amazed, especially in Texas. I couldn't figure that out because the band that would open for us would be, unbelievably raunchy and funky and loud and boogie, and we get on. And although we guess we did have that quality, every once in a while we could really crank it up and rock and roll. Because basically everybody likes to rock and roll. As much as everybody loves jazz, and we all love to play that kind of music, there's nothing like rock and roll for your soul. The songs were great, and there was a real dedication in the band. Everybody really wanted to play the best that they could, and they always worked hard at it. And because everybody liked to solo, and because there were good soloists in the band, that there was always room to solo. So we'd do a nice tight piece, and you'd be playing for about 1 minute and 40 seconds, and you could roar into a set of changes, burn your brains out, get back into a solid groove. And that, to me, people used to always look at us like there's something wrong with, not wrong with us, but like something different, because they couldn't believe that you could stuff that much music, I guess, into such a short space. I used to remember we used to open with Bodhisattva. That's on the flip side of the Steely Dan single. It's Santa Monica Civic. And there was so much happening in that song all the time, even when it didn't sound like it. I mean, it got down to the point where Denny and I were getting down to just even the percussive things, hitting them on the guitar, just getting it right. Just getting it right, so it's saying, oh, it's wonderful.
Here is a magnificent one. The one.
I wish I could tell you some stories, but I'm saving a lot of them because some great stuff. Oh, yeah. But it was touring. Now, this was a touring band. This band knew how to tour. It was silly. The whole band was silly. We used to do some great tours. We used to open for bands like, we used to open for the Doobie Brothers. And we used to open for Rare Earth. And we opened for Sha Na Na sometimes. So we were always going on the road with real fun guys. And we had Dinky Dawson was doing the PA. And the guy who mixed our monitors it was interesting. He would set up the monitors so he could hear them real well, and he'd get a nice sound that he liked, and he'd take his violin out and play with us on the set. Everything was really kind of a little, shaky. It was really shaky.
Donald and Walter didn't like touring at all. We'll hear why when we continue with Steely Dan Off the Record. So touring was real tough for you guys, huh?
Yeah, I often crumble very quickly.
Donald has to sing, every night, and that's a tough thing to do. And if you get a cold, and you still have to sing every night. I've seen that happen to almost everybody that I've worked with, that I've been on the road with, that had to sing every night. Eventually, their voices would begin to go. It's just
I've never had any training, voice training, nor am I inclined to take any, and
it's like football players and their knees, it's just a matter of time.
Oh, so it's not because you hate the rigors of being out on the road and eating?
Well, I dislike
I
the
hate
rigors of the road. As I say, when we were with Jay and the Americans and you had 4 guys fronting the operation with the uniforms on, that was okay with me. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, but you were still sick as a result.
Yeah, I was sick a lot, but it was okay. It's just, I don't like to front a band. You have to talk to the audience, tell jokes.
We were going to get matchbooks like this and have a picture of Donald and can you sing like this man? So we could get another lead singer on the road, and he'd just have to play the piano.
I don't like the, you know, jock atmosphere of traveling rock and roll band either. It's, you know...
Just corny, you know.
It's corny and boring and silly, you know.
70s, Steely Dan was changing. They'd started out as a group of guys building a band, but with each album, Donald and Walter brought in outside players to handle special parts. Then Jeff Baxter, guitarist in the original band, left to join the Doobie Brothers. He was followed by one of the background singers, Michael McDonald. What was going on? Here's Steely Dan producer Gary Katz.
Donald's and Walter's music was evolving, and it was opening into more sophisticated and sort of an expansion of their own style. And they wanted the freedom to be able to utilize as many styled players as fit the different tunes that were then starting to be written. Jeffrey had an opportunity at that time, because he had been playing off and on with the Doobie Brothers as a guest, to be a full-time member, which afforded him the opportunity to be on the road a lot, which he enjoys, which he wasn't getting with us, and didn't appear that he would. So he had an open opportunity to do something that he liked, and that worked out for him. And obviously Michael had an opportunity to do something, so he, with Steely Dan, Michael was basically a background singer, which is an ultimate of waste of talent. So it just naturally happened. There was no big blow-up or argument, or it never happened.
Dr. Wu from the 1975 album Katie Lied. Still to come, the Royal Scam, Asia, and Gaucho, when we continue with Steely Dan Off the Record. By the time Donald Fagen and Walter Becker went into the studio to record their fifth album, there was no regular band at all. Steely Dan was there writing and playing, with the addition of numerous other musicians who'd just come in for parts of various songs. Here's Steely Dan producer Gary Katz.
It's not a written chart for each player, because the purpose of having the really great players that we enjoy working with is to be able to get their musicality that we hired them for. So they have a general idea of the song and they have a chord sheet in front of them, but I want their expression and their ideas, so as Donald and Walter does. So it's not like a rigid chart, to say the least, but it is well written out in the sense that they know where it goes from section to section and what chords and so forth. And yeah, in that sense, it's structured out before we go to the studio. We do a demo, and we decide whether we like the way that the song lays structured, and if so, we write up chord sheets for that. If not, we'll make an adjustment and write up a chord sheet. And when the players come in, we have this little ugly demo with just, you know, a terrible electric piano sound and Donald sort of singing, and then maybe Walter playing a bass line, and chord sheets. And it's pretty clear what we're looking for. And then it's a process of going out and playing it down and hacking it out and getting what you like.
A lot of bands make records quickly. They go into a studio and just play. But Steely Dan sessions are long and sometimes difficult because Donald, Walter, and their producer Gary Katz are very demanding.
You know, you work with some people and you know what you can get and what you can't. I mean, in anything you do. I know what a certain performance, as Donald does, or Walter, know what a certain song can sound like, because we've heard it now enough times, either on a tape or by ourselves, or a rhythm track to relate to. We know what a song can sound like. And if it's short of that, it's not good yet. So, yes, it's boring on the 25th take. But there's a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, because we know what it will sound like. And we like that. I like that a lot. So I can endure it. But it is boring sometimes, yeah. And very difficult for the performer if you're continuing to do it and wanting it better than what you just did.
Don't Take Me Alive from the 1976 album The Royal Scam. In a moment, Becker and Fagan talk about Asia, lyrics, and their third ear when we continue with Steely Dan off the record.
Does Gary enter into the creative process with you, or do you get everything written and know what you're going to do, and then you go to Gary and go in the studio?
Yeah, basically that's what it is. Everything is prepared by us, then we go in the studio. Gary's function is mainly to supervise things in the studio, make phone calls, that sort of thing.
That's not entirely fair.
No, we decide, he's a third ear. Walter and I each have 1 ear apiece. I don't know if the public knows that. We both had accidents in our youth, and Gary has a third
ear.
one.
That's great. Mm-hmm. And I hope he'll be remembered that way.
Mm-hmm.
The Siamese ears.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, if you please.
Is Gary
if you don't please.
Actually, you can't see Gary's ears because of his hair, but if you could, you know what we were talking about. The way we work with Gary, Gary producing us, we have a kind of a massive gestalt. Is that the sort of relation?
Weltanschauung, but gestalt will do.
Well, what was I saying?
I can't remember.
For the German lesson. Tell you, we have kind of a difficult to describe.
This is a very German interview.
This is a really Teutonic interview. So that we can arrive at decisions, in a very, we know what we're all thinking. We have the same objectives pretty much, and so that not too many really bad discrepancies arise, where one person wants to go this way and someone wants to go that way.
Are you pretty much in accord in your thinking then when you're in the studio?
Not bad at all. I mean, we
have a few disagreements once in a while, but we've been together for 10 years, and it's been pretty smooth.
What we usually do is we'll try it. We'll try it one way, and we'll try it another way. And it's not that hard to tell what works. Sometimes it's hard to say in advance what's going to work, and that can be a problem. But we've gotten to be fairly extravagant with our recording techniques, so that if something doesn't come out the way we had it in mind for it to come out, we'll just do it repeatedly until we think that either it's a bad idea in the first place or it works out for us.
You don't get it Tuesday, you do it Thursday.
We recorded Peg maybe 5 or 6 times with 5 or 6 different bands.
Yes, that's the good thing about not having a band, because in effect you have a lot of bands.
So on one album it could be 10 different bands, huh?
Well, I think there was 5 different drummers on Asia. Must have been 5 different bands on Asia, and there were only 7 cuts or something.
When you have a tune and you're ready to cut it, do you hear it in your head and go, "This requires Bernard Purdy"? Get him on the phone. Do you know? I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We make up lists of tunes and lists of who we think they require, and then lists of who we're going to get if we can't get so and so.
And if it doesn't work, then we do it Thursday, as I say, with another band.
Deacon Blues, Steely Dan featuring the sax work of Pete Christlieb.
It came about because we liked the saxophone player on The Tonight Show, and we found out who it was. Is exactly how that happened. And we kept hearing this one guy who was great but never could figure out in the band. Who was great but never could figure out in the. Who was great but never could figure out in the. Who was great but never could figure out another player come down thinking it was him. And when it wasn't, we called the other one. And it was Pete. He was great. And he played on other things. He played on FM as well. Pete's a free spirit. And there's not much controlling Pete, which is exactly what we want. So you just run the music by him and he blows his brains out, and it's great. He's just a great player. But that is a very uninhibited session with Pete, because He just wants to play. He just wants to hear it, and he'll play it. And we like that sort of spontaneity.
Gary Katz. Like a lot of Steely Dan albums, Asia was done at the Village Recorder in West Los Angeles, and it took a lot more than the best equipment. Chocolate cookies and good and plenty when we continue with Steely Dan Off the Record. I'm Mary Turner. Making a Steely Dan album involves a lot more than just setting up mics and tape machines. Here's Dick LaPalme, head of the Village Recorder, where they did Asia.
When you're dealing with people as creative as Steely Dan, the atmosphere itself has to be conducive to creativity. We know the kind of cookies that Gary Katz, their producer, prefers. And you could bet that when we know he's coming in, we're going to have a lot of chocolate, whatever they are. I know that Roger Nichols, their executive engineer, loves good and plenty. You know what they are? Little candies? Sure. Stock the refrigerator with Dr. Brown. You try to make it as comfortable. You let them, you leave them alone. You just leave them alone. And let them do what they have to do. And if there's a problem, cover it for them as easily as you can, and try to keep the creative juices going all the time by anticipating a possible breakdown with equipment.
But every once in a while, those breakdowns do come, and the answer isn't always conventional.
We're having a problem with the right speaker that entire night. Yes and no, a problem. It would work for 15, then it'd start cutting out, and it got to the point where, well, we're going to do something. So Gary Katz came up with the best idea. He picked up a can of cola, and he just threw it at the speaker. And it worked. They did not have one problem from that moment on. The next morning, someone came in and said, Dick, the Valencia cabinet on the 604 and 8 is broken. The grill is cracked. What happened? Someone in the Steely Dan session, we think it was Gary. And someone said, no, it was probably Walter. They broke the cabinet, but the speaker worked from that moment on. And everyone said, wow, isn't that wonderful? So you repair the speaker cabinet. Again, the important thing is keep the creative juices flowing.
Track from Asia, featuring the sax solo by Wayne Shorter. As important as the music is, lyrics have always been a key element in Steely Dan songs. Donald and Walter talk about writing and their latest album, Gaucho, when we continue with Steely Dan Off the Record. Your lyrics are always really good, but sometimes they're also really hard to follow.
We're very much concerned with the sound of the words and the music, you know, and there are many instances when we're writing lyrics when we'll sacrifice literal meaning or, you know, linear storytelling effect for sound effects.
Yeah, we got a lot of flack about that, actually, you know. They say, wow, it's hard to follow.
That's the way we've been writing songs for a long time, and I think that we're aware of it.
We've gotten to the point where we rarely sacrifice literal meaning for the sound of the phonemes. I think we've come to the point where we can compromise and you know, come up with a lyric that's both meaningful and poetic, as you will, or as you want. It is rock and roll, and I think if you just get too serious with it, then it's going to be pretentious, you know.
Do you have fun with it still?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's one of the nice things about rock and roll. It's a very lighthearted thing at heart, at the center of it, and I think most people who forget that come up with something that's some of the most ponderous music I've ever heard in my life. It's really dreary sounding stuff that that happens when people get away from that basic idea that it is, you know, music that's designed to make you to have a infectious beat. You know, I would never describe our music as anything but rock and roll because of its rhythmic, the rhythms that we use. It's a very propulsive, jubilant thing, and that happens to let you get away with certain types of black humor, you know, that would normally perhaps be a little oppressive to some people. I understand that some people are cheerier than other people, but I don't care.
Like the previous albums, Gaucho featured a wide range of musical talents. In a moment, we'll hear a track with a guitar solo by Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits and background vocals by Michael McDonald of the Doobie Brothers. Time Out of Mind when we continue with Steely Dan Off the Record. Sometimes critics have said about you that using all those outside studio musicians on your records takes away from the excitement of rock and roll.
Well, that's you know, that's the critical point of view, and it has to do with the belief that you know, the great rock and roll is made by you know, some kind of primeval swamp savages with mysteriously equipped with electric guitars and crawl
together.
Right, they crawl out of the marsh, and then, you know, and they can hardly speak any English, and they come in and they record Hound Dog, you know, and that kind of thing, which is not true. You know, all of the, well, I should say all of it. A surprising number of the rock and roll records that people think of as being groups are actually the same studio musicians. You know,
they bring in firemen if they need them.
You know, the studio musicians are studio musicians in the first place because of their tremendous facility as musicians, by and large.
And also, when we work with these musicians, they come, they know they're not going to get a 3-chord, you know, commercial for Uncle Ben's Rice or something. You know, they're going to have some challenging progressions and some interesting rhythms to play, and they know we're looking for an atmosphere, you know, for each tune, and we're looking to them to come up with parts to cooperate with us, you know,
and furthermore,
help us with the arrangement and take a part in the making of the record. And because of that, they do a bang-up job for us, you know, which you know, they probably don't do all day long, you know, because they do have they work 9 hours a day or something. We're not, you know, as long as we're together and just the two of us and don't have a working band, we're never going to have the kind of unified group sound that, say, the band had for those years, or the Rolling Stones. You know, it's a different kind of thing, you know, and I think we accept that, and I think we look to our writing and arranging and so on to keep a unified style, because we don't have a band.
I never doubted that this sort of thing would catch on,
because,
frankly.
You know, we basically, I mean, musically, we're working with basic pop song forms. However we may distort them, they're still basic forms that are, you know, derived from a balanced structure that people have been listening to for years. You know, the popular songs of the 30s and 40s, we use those structures, and I guess that was originally derived from, I don't know, sonata form or something. I mean, it's basically where you have 2 themes, you know, one which is repeated several times, and a recapitulation and so on. You know, we're pretty traditional as far as that goes, and I think that's the reason why, for the popularity of it, aside from, of course, our own doubtful genius.
It can't be all sweetness and light either. I mean, I'd like to go on record as saying that, you know. I think by combining disparate elements, you often come up with something that'll appeal to a lot of people.
We like to use, you know, something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue.
In B flat.
In B flat.